All right, now let's do pulled items. Kathy, as we know, is over at Travis County right now. My hope is that she and the community will help convince the Travis County Commissioners Court that that's a really important cultural asset, the school and the property that makes up that track, and hopefully they'll consider extending themselves to keep that in the public domain and part of Waller Creek Park. But I know that discussion's going on over there, and that's where Kathy, I think, that's where Kathy is now. Item number 45, I pulled just because I know there's just so much conversation going on in the community. I have some questions or thoughts on it, but I'll defer to you, Greg, if you want.
Mayor, I think the city attorney handling that is on his way now.
Okay.
And so once he gets here, maybe we can handle it.
Okay, so let's hold that one just in advance for a second. City attorney coming down. Councilmember Poole, you pulled item number 100.
Thanks, Mayor. And this was also before it was item 100, I think it was item 47. We expanded the posting language to include some of the recommended language direction, primarily from the mayor, but also from a lot of folks around this dais. So thanks for your help with that. And I think, Mayor, do you have an amendment that you wanted to pass out to everybody?
I'm doing it right now. Thanks.
So my understanding, and maybe you want to speak to it, because I really don't have anything else to say except to thank everybody and the advocates for all their work in helping craft this. We've done this sort of economic stoppage or boycott in other instances in the past. Even this dais has on at least a couple of occasions. So we're sort of following that template. And Mayor, I think your change is simply to take the sentence that's at the top of page 3, starting on line 45, and make it its own, be it resolved.
It is, and I just want to thank you for being responsive to the posts that occurred. We almost had a complete council conversation over the message board, and
it was great.
I appreciate you picking up all those, and this is more just of a nit than anything else to make sure that it applies to everything, not just that one section. So thanks for taking that as well.
You bet.
Any further questions or thoughts on this item 100? Okay. Councilmember Alter, you pulled the 5-year consolidated plan issue.
Yes, I wanted to raise a couple issues with staff, if I might.
Okay.
Thank you. So good afternoon, and thank you for sticking around here. So first of all, I want to thank staff for all of your work on this. It's clear from everything I've seen that a tremendous amount went into this planning, and that there was a lot of outreach that also went into it. I wanted, though, to understand a couple of the choices a little bit better and to just raise awareness of those pieces of the plan. So first of all, I understand that we are repurposing some of our dollars in future years to allow for additional investment in job training, workforce development programs that will now be managed by the Economic Development Department. Can staff speak a bit to the vision that they have for that, and can you clarify whether you and EDD anticipate those funds being new additional dollars above and beyond what EDD already spends on job training, or do we anticipate those funds to be replacements for existing investments?
So first and foremost, hi, Rosie Truelove, Director, Neighborhood Housing and Community Development. They would be in addition, funds in addition to, not replacing current programming. As we were going through our consolidated planning process this year, there were a couple of different areas that we recognized we had the opportunity to address some of the priorities that Council has laid out, one of them being job training. And so we made the decision, given the constraints that come with using community development block grants and the Home Investment Partnership Grant for things like rental housing development assistance and the availability we have for our bond funds to help supplement that program to a much greater capacity than what we can achieve with our federal dollars. We made the decision to recommend that we reallocate some of those funds for years 2 through 5. Right, year 1 of those funds is the funding that we're allocating towards a public facility of homeless shelter that we were talking about earlier. Years 2 through 5 are community development block grant funds that we recommend allocating towards a job training type program. that we would be working with economic development to create, in accordance with federal regulations, to help low and moderate income Austinites.
Thank you. So that's not been decided what that job program will
Correct.
be at this point?
Correct. We know we have a year to work on that and to create it and to partner with our friends in economic development. And we know kind of the federal regulatory constraints that we have. But we're looking forward to the opportunity to find a good creative way to infuse that kind of capital into a much needed program for Austin.
Great, thank you. As you're considering that, I hope you will look at job training related to the skilled trades. One of the reasons we have an affordability issue is because construction costs are so high because there's a shortage of workers, and it's a great opportunity to channel folks into high-paying jobs and also to reduce some of the overall costs and facilitate construction. The second area that I wanted to highlight is that some of the funds are going to be moved over to Austin Public Health in terms of who's going to be overseeing them. And I believe that those are in the areas of childcare, mental health, and senior services. And I'm actually very pleased that in this plan that we're taking things out of NHCD that are not in your wheelhouse. We've had some audit issues for some other areas, and so I'm glad that we're moving those. Can you speak a little bit to the hopes for that Austin Public Health funding and your anticipation of whether those contracts will be reopened and reimagined under Austin Public Health, and will we be able to leverage those for greater good in this scenario?
Yes. So similar to how we recognize that NHCD is not perhaps best positioned to administer a job training program, we are similarly not in the best position to administer contracts relative to child care services and mental health and senior services. And so we've had conversations with the leadership in Austin Public Health, and they are welcome and opening to the concept of administering those dollars through their department. So they would be, again, additional dollars. As you may recall, with community development block grants, we have up to 15% of our annual allocation that could be spent on what is considered public services. Right? So in the terms of how we've used those dollars in the past, those public services have been for things like childcare, for senior services, for mental health services. Our tenants' rights contract falls into public services, as do contracts related to small business. And so, and it's, I think, for this coming year, the public service amount is about $1.1 million or so. We have recommended that we maintain those programs, although those dollars could be reprogrammed and used for something like homeless services if the council decided to. That would be a big change, and it's something we would need to think about and take time to process accordingly. But we're in a position now uniquely because we're going into a 5-year planning cycle where we can make that kind of a change. It would require us to not consider the con plan on Thursday and instead do probably another round of public input because we are changing the con plan from what we have had and what has had public comment up until this point. But we would have time with the federal government to be able to do that if we considered the con plan in August. And I bring that up largely because I heard what the mayor said this morning about we might need to make some hard decisions about how we fund things and the initiatives that we do choose to fund. So I'm just putting that on the table, and I'm saying that that's a possibility. But with respect to the way the con plan is currently drafted, it does maintain the services that we have anticipated for the first year that we have done traditionally with our federal dollars. In fact, even the same suite of contracts that we have. But what we are anticipating and have communicated to our contract holders is that come year 2 of the con plan, which is fiscal year 2020-2021, that those dollars would be administered through health, that there could be scoping changes, and there could be a competitive opportunity rather than just a direct subrecipient, which is how we've handled our CDB contracts to date. We've been working with our partners in health, and we will work on a transition plan and make sure we dot all of our I's and cross all of our T's and get all of that ready to go for however they would choose to design that. But again, we recognize that they're in a better position to help leverage, the $186,000 that we have allocated for mental health to combine with all of the other mental health services that they're doing to be able to make sure that we're meeting the needs for the community.
Just to clarify, I wasn't asking to necessarily reopen it. I just wanted to make sure also that we would have an opportunity with those funds within the bucket of, say, childcare to reimagine what those are being spent for. On the issue of childcare, I was concerned to see that our childcare investments are decreasing,
Yes.
as I understand it. And I believe you have reasons for that, and I wanted to just hear from you why those investments were decreasing.
Sure. We have, for the last 15 to 20 years, we've had the same series of contracts for our community development block grant dollars for those public service contracts. And either in the last year to 2 years, one of our contract holders in childcare has dropped out. They informed us that they weren't in a position where they could continue with that contract. And so we put out an RFP to try to program those dollars and had no responses to that RFP. And so in doing that, we're making the choice now to, as we're shifting dollars around, to just reallocate those dollars elsewhere to help meet the public facility needs and the job training program.
Thank you. As we move forward, I hope that Austin Public Health will look closely at our investments in childcare. We have a tremendous need for childcare dollars in the city, and as these contracts that are existing and remaining are transferred over, and just in the broader context that we really do need to think strategically how we can get our investments to go further. There's some interesting, exciting opportunities with HB3 passing, where the state is going to be investing more in pre-K and exploring how we can leverage more of those dollars and other kinds of things. But I'm not thrilled that we are reducing that amount. I understand that there's a contract issue and whatnot, but I think we need to be doing that with open eyes and being mindful of that moving forward.
And we are excited about the opportunity to have our contracts help provide perhaps better leverage for the dollars that are being expended through Austin Public Health. Ours is but a small sliver of the total amount that's going in each of these service areas, and I'm hopeful that we'll be able to, with administration through that department, we'll be able to get more bang for the buck, stretch the dollars further and provide a greater level of service.
Yeah, I mean, we have, made some really important investments of, you can do $16,000 into a classroom refurbishment, and then those classrooms, those schools get access to leverage state dollars on an ongoing basis. And so just being really mindful of those opportunities, I think, is important, that keep returning returns for those children over time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Any further discussion? Just to highlight at a really high level, one other thing that you said that you guys would take a look at is student housing. Not really discussed in that report, but taking a look at student housing with UT and HT to see if the student housing in this city, the number of students that are also competing in the market for affordable housing, does that have an impact? And if it does, then what we might be able to do in conjunction with those universities that might be a relatively inexpensive way for us to help free up housing for non-students. So I'm anxious to see that work as well. Anything else? All right. Yes.
I was wondering, where does it say that you're doing that?
That was actually a question that we added to the housing market study, to have the consultant that we hired for the housing market study to perform an analysis to kind of help us gauge the relative impact on the substantial number of students that we have and how that impacts our housing that's affordable, market affordable, and income restricted. And so that's, we were in a meeting earlier this week, and I mentioned that we had that in the housing market study, but I have not yet had a chance to go back and pull that information out of the housing market study. So we'll get that pulled out and shared back.
Does that need to be in the consolidated plan at all if we wanted to make sure that that was something that we're pursuing? So Mayor and I have been talking about this for quite a while, and just if you take UT alone, we have something like 40,000 students that don't have housing at UT, and many of them are in our affordable housing across the city. And if we could find a way to house them more quickly, we may be able to make bigger dents in our housing faster. And so does that need to be in the consolidated plan in some way, or does that fall under other buckets enough that you'd be able to pursue those opportunities as we get greater clarity on how to do that?
I think it's the latter. I think if we were looking at expending dollars, it would be probably looking at creating housing through potentially our bonds rather than using CDBG or other federal resources. But it is part of the housing market analysis that is one of the required pieces for doing the consolidated plan every 5 years. And so we'll share that information back with council, but I don't know that it needs to be called out specifically in the consolidated plan because I don't anticipate using federal dollars for that.
Okay. Well, I would just like to second what the mayor's saying about that being a really important direction for us to be considering moving forward. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let's call up item number 64. Are the attorneys here yet to do the homelessness issue? I'm here. What? Are you doing it? Okay. Well, then let's go back and let's pull up item 45. And I will let you open since it's your resolution.
Well, I just want to start out again by thanking everybody that's been engaged in the conversation and mentioning that I am, proud to be on a council and part of a city that's focusing so much on addressing the root cause issues of homelessness. And just in that last item, we're going to dedicate $8 million more to addressing issues of homelessness. We have an item on the agenda to open up more shelter beds. Like I said, our last set of bond dollars opened up more permanent or funded more permanent supportive housing. So we know that to address homelessness at the end of the day, we need housing and services and mental health care and all of those things. But these ordinances are a part of our law, and we have to figure out how to address them. They were raised in a 2017 audit. They've been a part of community conversation quite a bit since then. And my intent, and I think I can speak on behalf of my co-sponsors on this point, was to change the ordinances so that the ordinances only ban behavior that is dangerous, only ban behavior that is inconsistent with the use of public space, only ban behavior that actually harms health and safety, and not have ordinances on our books that are banning something that we can't say is wrong, or banning or having ordinances that ban something that constitutionally some of us may feel uncomfortable with saying that something is constitutional. So I want to lay out what is actually on the agenda, because I think there's been some misinformation around what is actually on the agenda and what it does, and I want to do some of that by conferring with the city attorney to make sure that what I say is accurate, so that everybody understands what it is that we are doing. And so the intent is to no longer have as a criminal offense things like sleeping in your car if it's not endangering anybody's health or safety or impeding reasonable use of public space, to no longer ban asking for money, say at night, or asking for money in a way that is non-threatening. And so, but I have had people ask lots of questions, so I want to ask the city attorney to confirm if these things are true. So some people have asked whether or not the changes proposed would allow for aggressive behavior like touching somebody in an unwanted way, or screaming and saying obscene things to a person. They've said, well, is this going to allow for people to say obscene things in a way that disturbs the peace? And my understanding is that nothing posted on the agenda is going to change those state laws that already ban aggressive behavior, touching a person, yelling obscene things at them, that those things are not allowed regardless of whether you're asking for money or not. Is that correct?
Right. There are state law provisions that the city would rely on if you change the ordinances that are in place now on solicitation that would prohibit, for example, assault or touching, unwelcome touching, that kind of thing.
And some folks have raised the question of whether those state law provisions, the ones you just described, like disorderly conduct or simple assault, that those could force police officers to use a higher level misdemeanor. But my understanding is that simple assault, which would be that kind of touching, or disorderly conduct, are Class C misdemeanors, so that they're at the same level. Is Is that right, that there's Class C options for disorderly conduct and low levels?
There are some Class C options, and I know you've asked us to come back and have a public conversation, a public document that we can produce to help people understand what the differences are between what the ordinances we have in place right now are, and if you passed what you have proposed, and then looking at state law. So we'll have some scenarios that we'll put together that I hope will be helpful to the public.
Great. Some people have asked questions around whether or not this changes our rules as it relates to parks, because some folks have asked, well, if people can sleep outdoors and not break the law, then could they stay overnight in our parks? But we don't have any changes posted to our parks rules, and so my understanding is that park curfews and all other park rules would still apply.
That's correct. The park rules disallow camping right now.
Right. And so we've also had other issues and questions brought up about whether somebody could camp at a school. But my understanding is that schools can continue to set their own parameters about who can be on campus and who cannot be on campus and what activities are allowed to happen at schools. So is it correct that schools could continue to operate as they are, that this is not changing what happens and doesn't happen at a school?
Certainly on school property itself, the schools will be able to maintain their schools and their own rules. I think some questions have been about the area around a school, which becomes a little bit different.
Right. And then some folks have said, well, this will allow for, this could put us in situations where people are endangering themselves or endangering another person, but the ordinances say specifically that it's still against our rules for you to endanger yourself or endanger another person. So if somebody brings up endangerment, the current ordinance, the ordinances as posted, ban camping or sitting or lying down in a way that endangers yourself or another person. Is that generally?
Right. A police officer would have an ability to cite if somebody was endangering themselves or endangering others.
And or if a person was making it unreasonably inconvenient for you to use a sidewalk or unreasonably inconvenient for you to use public space.
That is your current language.
Right. I think that there are potentially other questions and issues out there. Some of what I've heard about or been asked about have to do with issues of drug use, public intoxication, other issues that plague some of the most vulnerable members of our community. And I think we all recognize that those are really important issues that all of us lose sleep over and all of us work on. This doesn't change any of the rules or laws associated with any of those things either. And changing these ordinances isn't going to fix, I haven't heard anybody saying changing these ordinances is going to fix those issues on its own. But what changing these ordinances presents us the opportunity to do is to not have, in my view, not have laws on the books that say something is a criminal act that somebody just can't help. And I think Councilmember Kitchen said just earlier today, I thought it was exactly right, that people are homeless because they don't have a place to live, and that there is no argument about that. And so if a person has no place to live, but they need to sleep somewhere, and if they are sleeping somewhere and they aren't violating a curfew, they're not getting in anybody's way, they're not endangering themselves, they're not endangering anyone else, I can't figure out how I could continue saying that that is against the law if they can't help that and they aren't endangering or causing any problem for anyone. So at the end of the day, that is the intent of what it is that we're trying to do, is to try to align that with our values. And to me, it's not just about homeless individuals. To me, it's actually about all of us, because we all benefit as a community when our laws reflect not only our values and our Constitution, but when our laws say things are wrong, when we can identify that they're actually wrong. We all benefit from that. That makes our society a better place, that we make sure our laws only target things that are really wrong. And if a person is so poor that they don't have any money, they have to ask for money to survive. If a person is so poor that they don't have somewhere to sleep, then I just can't figure out ethically myself how to say that that is a criminal violation in this city. So that's the intent. I think it's a hard conversation. It's something that we have to we have to try to figure out. We've taken some time trying to figure that out. We talked about it at the Audit and Finance Committee back in 2017. The Public Safety Commission has reviewed it. We've had multiple executive sessions on it. It was talked about during the Homelessness Action Plan. It's a hard thing, but at the end of the day, I still haven't figured out how I can leave something on the books that says something is wrong, that I can't identify how it's wrong if it's just a person surviving and they're not doing anything else besides that. So I would just urge that we try to get that word out, because some folks are saying, well, that this would allow people to be aggressive or allow people to break public intoxication laws, and it's just not doing any of those things. So I look forward to that continuing conversation. I appreciate the city attorney answering those questions. In the interest of creating some of that time and space for those questions to be answered, I think I and the co-sponsors are going to recommend that we vote on this on June the 20th. Again, I think that there is real critique that I've heard from some people that are experiencing homelessness themselves, that we've been talking about this since 2017 and long before that. So I don't want this to drag out too long. But I think given that there has been misinformation and that we need to correct that misinformation, I'm ready to set this for a vote on June 20th. But I just would not feel okay with going another summer of continuing to have a law in the book saying if you sleep in your car, that's a criminal violation. To say if you don't have enough money to eat and you ask somebody for money to eat and it's 7:30 at night, that is criminally against the law. So I just feel like we need to get this done. I think we should get it done on Thursday, but given some of the public discussion and wanting to make sure that the correct information is out there, I'm ready to vote on this on June the 20th to have more time.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate you and the co-authors' willingness not to have a vote here on Thursday, but I want us to talk about it on Thursday if we can. You know, this is a decision for the council to make. As I said this morning, I think that we're really lucky in this community that we are so aligned as a community from top to bottom, that dealing with the homelessness challenge in our community is our highest priority. It's reflected by the strategic plan vote that this council took. It's certainly being evidenced by how we're spending resources in this community, the time and attention. Bringing in a new executive level position in the city that's going to deal with it, the engagement with the stakeholder groups, with the Downtown Austin Alliance, with the Chamber, with the trade associations around the city, and certainly neighborhood groups. Everyone seems to be involved in this, and everyone, I think, has expressed a real commitment to doing everything that we can in a city that has as many resources as we have. Actually bringing those things to bear to deal with this challenge. And I think it is great that we are this united, and the degree to which we can maintain that, I think we will be best able to help the people that we want to help. I think that the community conversation right now is happening all over the place. I think it's good for you to have answered some of the questions that you answered this morning. I think there are lots of other questions too. As I listen to the radio and see what's happening on social media, and as I get interviewed and as I go around the city, there are a lot of questions and concerns. I think we need to daylight those. And I think that Thursday provides us a real opportunity to do that. And what I would suggest, colleagues, is that we hold off the general public debate on an issue as we would normally have it until we set it to vote. But on this first meeting, since we were going to just postpone it, but I would have us pause long enough to almost curate a conversation. And I would bring in perhaps some of the stakeholders that helped draft this and speak to the rationale behind it. But I would also like to have the opportunity for representatives of a representative of the Downtown Alliance to be able to come and speak to us, perhaps the member of the police association to come speak to us, our chief to speak to us. Maybe there's a way for us to curate a conversation with the point being to elevate and air everyone's concerns and hopes with respect to this, so that either at that meeting or following the meeting with the city attorney's office, we can respond to the questions and concerns that are being asked, so that we make sure that whatever we do is best reflective of what it is that is our best intent as a community. this is a conversation that's happening in a lot of places all over the city, and if we could pull it into one place to identify the issues that need to be addressed or the concerns that are raised, and I think we have a real opportunity to do that on Thursday. And so if there are, I would recommend that we tell the clerk not to open up the public sign-in for this event, this item on Thursday, because we're going to postpone it. But that if you identify council members, people that you want to make sure have a chance to raise concerns. I don't want to cut off anyone here from being able to ask a question to someone they want to ask a question of. I'm thinking in terms of maybe 5 to 8 people that would be able to speak to us to raise concerns or something like that. I think we have a real opportunity to advance this conversation so that it is as factually based and as data-driven a conversation as we can possibly have. This is an important conversation. Everyone I talk to is trying to achieve the same results, the same objective, everyone. And we just need to figure out how to make sure that we are addressing or at least indicating we hear everything that everyone is raising.
I guess I have concerns about the picking out certain stakeholders because, and this is the first time I heard the suggestion, so I'm just kind of thinking out loud at this point, but I mean, the reality is people experiencing homelessness, they're not going to be able to come here and tell us how the barriers that these kinds of ordinances put up for them and how it makes it harder to access if you get a ticket and then don't show up to court and get a warrant, and how it's harder to access housing and harder to get a job. And I'm concerned about the majority of what I've heard thus far are from people not wanting us to repeal that, for honestly, for reasons that I feel are misunderstandings of what we're doing. And so I'm concerned about skewing the public debate and the headline being the majority of speakers that spoke said they didn't want this to happen. And so I say we either open the public debate up to anybody who wants to come, or we don't open it up. But I'm concerned how we pick who those stakeholders are, and what that would look like. And then I don't know if I can add much more to what Councilmember Casar said about this, but I was listening to the work session earlier during I was at a groundbreaking in my school, and I heard Councilmember Alter speak about reaching out to the public in the instance of asking for philanthropy and asking our public, and so these are such difficult questions. And so I kind of want to make a similar plea to, as we continue to have these discussions on this item, this is a situation where everybody can give to this. Not everybody can give philanthropically, but everybody can show some compassion about this issue. Everybody can try to understand the circumstances that our fellow Austinites are in, and unable to access housing. And so, the mayor also mentioned people want to help in this homelessness issue, and that's how I would ask our public to help, to not turn this into a debate about undesirables or something like that. To this be a conversation about compassion and making sure we're reducing barriers for people to get out of a very vulnerable and very sad, very, very sad situation. And, I'm seeing this more of the human element of for me, I can support postponing this to the 20th, but I'm steadfast in my support that we need to repeal these ordinances, and I am prepared on the 20th to continue to be a yes vote. And lastly, I'll just, adding to that human element part of it, I remember Councilmember Tova telling us a story one time of her kids seeing a homeless person and her explaining that to her child. And I just recently had that conversation with my 4-year-old, and it was really, to me to explain to her that this person was there because they didn't have a home over their head. And to see her face and how, she kind of understood that and how it affected her. It affected me that, that we have people and we're having to explain to our children that people are in our community that don't have homes. And I think this is a way that government can do good and break down these barriers to people trying to get out of this situation. So again, I support a postponement, but I will vote yes on the 20th, and I hope we are giving the public a chance to continue to have this conversation, and I think 2 weeks is time for that to get all the information out there, the correct information out there.
So just to respond real quickly, and that's certainly the will of the council, and it's certainly nothing I suggested earlier, so there's so much conversation that's happening, and a lot of it, I think, it doesn't accurately represent what's in the resolution or what the laws are. So my thought was to try to elevate some of those issues so that over the next 2 weeks we might be able to actually focus the conversation on what's really at issue in this. And it was in part giving people that, one, I think we should have voices represented there of people that are experiencing homelessness, because I think that is a really important perspective. It wasn't intended to be a thorough conversation or anything, but mostly just identifying issues in hopes that our legal staff were at that meeting, we could kind of narrow the issues and say, well, wait a second, that's not part of this, or this is part of this conversation. I just thought that we have a very unwieldy conversation that's happening right now, and if we could direct it a little bit over the next 2 weeks, that might help us do that. So it wasn't in terms of much, public testimony, as much as it was almost just continuing a briefing kind of format that we do normally in work session, but giving, I guess, an additional briefing opportunity so that we or our legal staff and we could respond to the concerns that were raised. Natasha, and then
yes.
Ann.
So, I guess I'll echo what what Mayor Pro Tem Garza said about not being able to add a whole lot to what you said, Greg, but wanting to just sort of put some highlights on some things that you pointed out and something that Councilmember Flanagan pointed out earlier. The misinformation, it can lead people to make really poor decisions that don't necessarily reflect our values, like you pointed out. We want our decision making to reflect our values. And like Mayor Pro Tem pointed out, being careful about not letting the conversation sort of extend to the concept of human beings being undesirable. One of my constituents sent me a note, and the way she described homeless people, she used the word dirty. And so her concern was that she has to talk to dirty people. And I just think I appreciate that you want to elevate the level of conversation that we're having, because ultimately what we're talking about is people who don't have homes. I also appreciate, you pointing out, Mayor, that we all can agree on at least one thing. People need homes. Housing is a human right. Everybody needs a house. I think the one thing that we're not pointing out in a way that is as profound as the concept is, we talk a lot about equity as a council, and we're not saying enough that the people who inherently are affected by the ordinances that we're proposing to repeal are people of color, are poor people, are people already existing in the margins, and them receiving citations and or arrest do not eliminate their homelessness. It makes it worse. It exacerbates the issue. And so if we can all agree that the goal is for people to have housing, we have to also all agree that we consistently have conversations about the importance of us addressing a lack of equity in the city of Austin. And if and when we do that, we are acknowledging that we have the opportunity on the 20th, which I'd like to also point out, I really appreciate the opportunity to postpone. I know that the conversations have been happening since 2017, and there are probably some people who are very frustrated by the continuation of conversations that frankly have already happened. Stakeholders who frankly have already had the opportunity to express their concerns. Those haven't changed, I'm certain. It's the same concerns. But that to say, I'm a newcomer. Councilmember Ellis is a newcomer. Maybe we haven't had enough of an opportunity to engage these stakeholders and talk to them about what their concerns are. So I really appreciate having the opportunity to extend the conversation, but I do have some concerns when I hear us say, that first reading or, that first opportunity to talk about it. I was really operating under the impression that on the 20th, we all come armed with the ability to say, I vote yes or I vote no. And my hope is the vote is yes. My vote will certainly be yes. But to echo what you said, Councilmember Casar, I don't want to drag it out. There's no need to drag it out. I think 2 weeks is a sufficient amount of time for all of us to have the opportunity to talk to the necessary stakeholders and express our concerns and hear theirs, but then move forward with a definitive decision on the 20th. I'd really, be disappointed if we dragged it out past the 20th. And then I'll leave us with this. Mayor Pro Tem, I am hesitant to cry in public because it is not pretty. I mean, it is bad. But you really stirred something up in me that reminds me, one of the reasons I decided to open myself up to the level of scrutiny that a council person experiences, and that is my children are watching me, and they're watching all of us. All of our children are watching us, how we respond to an issue that is so important and how we wield our power. They're watching us, and I want them to be proud of me. I want them to be proud of you all too. I want them to acknowledge that we took a difficult and complicated conversation and decided that if at the end of the day, the thing that we could make stop happening, which is the continuation of the criminalization of homelessness, if we can have any part in making that stop, then I think we owe that to people experiencing homelessness. We owe that to ourselves and our city, and we owe that to our children. And I'll stop there. Thank you for your time.
Pio and Jimmy.
Thank you, Mayor. I've been working on this issue for over 30 years, ever since we went out and bought a gooseling at Callahan called Homer, and we've been fighting for, House the Homeless is one of the organizations that we worked with for years. So, we've had a lot of conversation when it comes to the homeless and the panhandling and the sleeping and all of that, because even 30 years ago we were advocating for housing so that we could get these people a decent house, a roof over their head, and a place where they could store their possessions and be able to take a shower and relax in safety. So that's to me, that's more of a God-given right, and we should all try to get to that point where we don't have the homeless situation that we're having here in the United States, one of the richest countries in the world. So I'm going to be actually really, I'm going to support this one because I know that's the right thing to do.
Ann is next.
Thank you. I agree with what everyone has been saying. And thank you for all of your work over the years, Councilman Renteria. The bottom line is that we need housing. We need housing for people. I mean, and I think when I talk to my constituents, that's what they're feeling. They really feel the concern that we're all expressing for people that are living on the streets, and so we have some opportunities to do something a number of things that are concrete around taking steps, whether it's housing-focused shelter, whether it's the Salvation Army, whether it's these ordinances, and the many other things that the council's trying to do. So we need to keep working on it. We need to keep saying that housing is a priority, and we need to make sure it happens. I see a real opportunity with this proposal, this 45, and I thank everyone who's been bringing it forward. I mean, right now, what people are really concerned about, I think, is certain activities or behaviors. And there's a lot of confusion about what we do as a community about them. And we have tools to do something about them. But that's really what the issue is. It's not about people being homeless. It's not about giving someone a ticket because they're homeless, because that's not the right thing to do. So what we need to be saying is, okay, are we clear enough that, and I forget the exact words that are being proposed, but are we clear enough in how we change these ordinances to get at what's appropriate, what's really appropriate, what we're trying to do? And are we all on the same page? And by all, when we take a step as a council, is what we think's going to happen, what the public understands, what our police department understands, what our court system understands. Because what we have in place right now doesn't work for anyone. It ends up criminalizing people for being homeless, and it doesn't get at the kinds of activity or behaviors that people have some legitimate concerns about with regard to, public health and different things like that. We've all talked about those specific things. So I think this gives us, I appreciate the chance to have a little bit more time to the 20th to really think through those kinds of situations that we're really trying to get at and make sure we're focused on that, make sure we all understand that. So with what we're coming out with is something that everybody's understanding and on the same page with. And then we can write something, we can right the wrongs that may have been happening or that have been happening in terms of just being criminal because someone's homeless. It's too broad a swath. It's really not what we're trying to get at. So so I look forward to the continued conversation between now and the 20th.
Mayor, any comments on this? Yes, Jay.
Yeah,
Sorry.
just quick. I just want to thank Councilmember Robert Madison for what you said, and on top of that, there are values in this community that we are trying to reflect in our ordinances and laws and practices and rules, et cetera. There's also the factual issue. As they say, facts are facts, and there are things being spread about this that are not facts. When there is a Photoshop of Congress Avenue lined with tents, that is not a fact. That is not going to happen nor be allowed under any contemplated change that we're doing here. And there are other examples of that being spread around. There's a whole conversation about our community's values, and there's also facts are facts, and we got to be very careful in with our constituents and being clear when the things that are being said by whomever is saying them, whether or not there is any factual basis or if it's just propaganda or rhetoric.
Any further discussion, Paige?
Just make a few quick comments. Councilmember Casar, I really appreciate the frequently asked questions that you've handed out. I hope they'll be available publicly for other people watching that are curious. Answering these questions kind of fell right in line with some of the concerns that I did have. I don't think that homelessness should be criminalized, but I also had worries about, aggressive panhandling, or if people are going to be able to camp for long periods of time in places that may not be the best for them or other passersby. And I just also am approaching this with a unique experience of someone who was on the front steps of City Hall with the Occupy movement and is now sitting on City Council. And that's a vastly different perspective when you're shouting at City Hall and now you're tasked with solving these problems. And I think that all of our hearts are in the right place. I'm happy to be a co-sponsor on Councilmember Kitchen's work with a shelter, and I think that we all really want to do the right thing here and make sure that if we're telling people they can't be in a specific area, how important it is to tell them they have a place to go, that they're going to have services and access to things like education and a housing exit strategy. And I think that we're really on the edge of that here, and I think we're all committed to doing the right thing. And I'm happy to have a little bit more time to ask questions and make sure we're all feeling very sound in the decisions that we're making. So thank you all for bringing this.
I will post the FAQ on the message board if that's useful.
Okay. Yes,
One last thing.
Natasha.
Councilmember Kitchen brought up a really good point, which ultimately the goal is housing. But one thing I'd like to say and have everybody remember, you can't get housing if you got a warrant. So let's really think about some of the impediments to housing. Even if we create the housing, if there are barriers that exist by people not having their ID, that got lost in all their stuff that got stolen while they were arrested, or them having an active warrant being an impediment to them entering these housing opportunities that we create, then did we really help? So just want to put that out there as well.
So finally, I just think it's really important to note that on Thursday's agenda, while we're discussing these three ordinances, we are also discussing putting additional shelter beds in place, and the conversations involving more than one location as we see the conversation develop. It includes putting together a classically Austin, truly innovative solution for trying to protect people's opportunity to have IDs and all the materials by using blockchain technology. I see that the University of Texas just joined a consortium on that today, and their people are helping with the city's efforts in this regard. This is the highest priority. I just believe that if we can have a conversation where everyone listens to everyone else, we can ferret through what is true and what is not true, what is possible, what's not possible in a very honest conversation that will hopefully advance us as a community to do what it is that we all want to be doing here anyhow. So I appreciate the incredibly constructive feel that this has right now. All right, let's go on to the next item. We had, yeah?
Do you want to address time certain now, or you want to wait till we're at the end of everything?
Here, we just have two other things.
Okay, go ahead.
Two other things real fast. Greg, you had item number 64, mobile home.
Yes,
Code amendments?
Mayor, we have our mobile home rezonings. We'll be handling half of them on Thursday and the other half at the end of the month. There's also an agenda item to potentially modify how many RVs are allowed on a mobile home site. That's an ordinance that is posted. There is one zoning case where the existing owner has 80% of their units being RVs, and the ordinance as posted by the staff has that only at 50%. So one thing I'm going to sort out between here and Thursday is whether to bring that up to 80% to allow for all of the existing mobile home and RV parks that we're rezoning to be in conformance. So I'm just raising that because I didn't have time to post it on the message board that I may move that 50 up to 80 and will. So I just want to give people fair notice.
Could I speak to that?
Yes.
Yes, I'd be happy to work with you on that. I think that may be the one that's in District 5, and I don't want to create a situation where they're existing now. Well,
the whole purpose was to try
Yeah.
to preserve and keep what we have existing.
Right.
So this might help. So let's talk about it.
okay.
Anything else on this point? I think you're okay. That gets us then to Jimmy. You had indicated pulling a whole series of things. Do you want to address that?
Yeah, so I was going through the procurement items in my agenda review, as we often do, and saw a few that maybe need to be evaluated within the context of the legislature's change to law. And rather than dragging us through a long and involved conversation in short order about whether or not each individual item is a good idea, I went through and found the ones that I believe can be pushed off to the 20th so that staff has time to give us a little bit more information about what the long-term impacts are of these contracts, given the long-term future of our finances is not the same as when those procurements were first put out.
That might be a good conversation to have. I don't know how you've pared down the list. It looked to me like some of those things were enterprise fund requests,
Yes.
and some of them were general fund.
Yes.
Those almost seem to be two different kinds of conversations to me, but then I don't know what kind of conversation you anticipate having. So I certainly don't mind them all coming up. but one is kind of susceptible of the cap kind of conversation, and the enterprise funds operate outside of that environment.
I think they're a little more related, and it'll be worth for us to have a deeper conversation about that.
Okay.
Yeah, along those lines, I had already sent in a request for some information on if we have to do away with those red light cameras. That's one of the contracts that we have. How much money are we saving by having to terminate that contract? And so that may also be some information that we could get based on your request.
Well, my hope is that by the time we get to the 20th, there's a larger staff conversation about tax caps, because I think we're getting a briefing from the legislative team and others. So there's going to be a lot more information coming to us about the impacts, which is part of the reason why the push.
Ann?
Councilmember Flanagan, have you posted a list? Did I miss?
It's on the message board.
Okay, got it.
I posted that. It was yesterday or the day before. Yeah.
Okay, any other discussion on this? All right, I think those are all the pulled items, all the discussion items. Now let's talk scheduling. Ann, you wanted to raise a time certain issue?
Well, I have two items for time certain, and I imagine others do too. The Butler pitch and putt, I'll be pulling that so we can have a conversation about that. And wanted to suggest a 2 o'clock time certain. I'm sorry, I should know what number that is, but I'm not remembering at the moment. 39. Which one? 39. And then 49, which is a housing-focused shelter. I wanted to ask if it fits with other timing that we have a time certain of 4 o'clock for that one.
So I would say, I think that, Natasha, I think that you're out much of Thursday.
Yeah, if I may, it's with a great deal of regret that I have to be out, but I've had the misfortune of watching my relatives grow and age and missing the opportunity to see them as they get older, and I don't want to miss it. Sorry, Aunt Shirley, but she is getting old. So I'm going to be visiting my family and my aunt for her birthday. So I'll miss you guys, but I will be out on Thursday.
Okay. I've been invited to attend. It's actually kind of timely right now. There's a North American meeting of mayors in Mexico. So there's a bunch of Mexican mayors and select group of U.S. mayors and some mayors from Canada. I'm going to miss the Thursday evening program so that I can be here Thursday during the day. But it was my intent to fly out Thursday night after dinner. So, I mean, it's possible I could drive to Dallas late when our meeting was done, but if there's a way for me to leave at dinner to be able to get on a plane, I would do that. So I mentioned those things. If we setting time certains later in the day where we can't bring it up earlier, if we wanted to, we may miss some opportunities.
Well, I guess the point of these two is afternoon.
Okay.
Because the folks that I had heard from were interested in doing it in the afternoon instead of in the evening. But I don't know what everybody else needs, and I don't have a good idea of how much time we need during the day. Because you had a conversation earlier about 45, and so we need to figure out when that's happening.
Well, I think we'll do that one as quickly as we can, because hopefully
so do that
we'll
in
just
the
set up a
morning.
table and have some people talk to us and answer questions. That would be a record that anybody could look at on that. I can't imagine that there would be a problem in saying we'll pick up those two after lunch, just because I don't think we'll have an opportunity to resolve them. We could certainly say we're not going to vote on them until after lunch, so that if someone shows up to speak, they would be given that opportunity to be able to do that.
Okay, I don't think they'll be able to be there in the morning. So.
And they wouldn't have to. What I'm saying is we would say we're not going to take a vote on either of those two things in the morning. So we know it'll be extended to the afternoon, and if anyone shows up in the afternoon, they will be given the opportunity to speak. It could be we don't even call it up till the afternoon, but at the very least, in the event we're able to take some people that wanted to speak to it in the morning, we can, but we're not going to take a vote on it, and we'll keep it open for speakers at after lunch.
Do you think we could say that we'll be taking the pitch and putt first, and then after that we'll take the housing-focused shelter?
I'd be fine doing that.
Okay.
Okay?
Mayor, sorry, I missed it and y'all were looking at me, but I was responding to getting that thing up on the message board, the FAQ, where you describing what time if we decide to ask a few people some questions on the ordinances. Did you all just discuss what time that might?
Well, he was suggesting the morning for that.
What I would love to do is maybe when I post on the message board the FAQ, maybe include a suggestion for a time. And Mayor, maybe you and I could talk about that briefly, because if we want some of the folks experiencing homelessness that have been in stakeholder meetings to come, I would want to figure out what time that they could. And I want to think about what Mayor Pro Tem Garza said about if we were going to ask people questions, maybe having slots, being two advocates, two of the stakeholders that have been for it, two of the stakeholders that have concerns, maybe a service provider and a person experiencing homelessness, something very prescribed, so that it's.
And I would love to work with you on that and curate by invitation, just to try that. We're trying to elevate issues and daylight issues.
Right. So maybe when I post FAQs, we'll also post for when folks should anticipate we have that conversation, so I can have a minute to check.
And that's fine. And I don't think it's entirely necessary that we do it all at the same time. So it could be that we could take one or two people in the morning and they could talk from their perspective, and we could take somebody else, at a different time as well.
City Attorney's got a question.
Mayor, just for clarification for the clerk's office, are you all going to close the
We're just
speakers?
no speakers sign up for this.
We would just be
asking.
asking questions.
We're just going to ask questions. It's kind of been a briefing, and we may invite people to participate with us in that. But let's talk about making sure that we have the right people in the right way, not necessarily all at the same place. That way we can fill gaps with people, and we will make the accommodation that Ann requested with respect to items 4 and 39.
And would it be, when we say after lunch, should I say 2 o'clock or 1:30? People just really like to have an idea in mind.
Excuse me, we have 4 executive sessions during lunch.
Oh, okay. Okay, I forgot about that.
So at 2 o'clock,
Thank you, Ian.
so
we'll say 2 o'clock, and then we'll just see what happens.
And if we can get into executive, I think 2 o'clock would be fine.
Okay, got it.
I think it'd be a fine thing to tell people.
Okay.
Okay, with that said, I think we've taken care of everything that we need to. It is 3:22, and this meeting is adjourned.
Soon begin. Creation packs a heavy punch. This too will pass, I have a hunch. Colored arch up in the sky. I'll be ready, I'll be high, and I'll be dry. Bye-bye. Gazing at my destiny, playing with the cards I see.